Hi everyone, happy Friday and welcome to today's immigration chat. I don't know what's going on today. My words are not coming out. Okay. So today I want to talk about a topic that I absolutely love, which is citizenship, naturalization. So after you've had your green card, it is time for your naturalization. And now you have an interview. What do you need to prepare for? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So, for those that don't know me, I am Lilian Chukura. I am the owner of Lily Legal, where we help our clients get status for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So, like I said, we are going to be talking everything naturalization interview, how to prepare, what to expect when you actually walk into the room, how stressed you should be or not stressed, um, and all of that. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And like I said, I love this topic because this is like your last thing as an immigrant, right? As you're going through the immigration process, naturalization is your last step. Once you are a naturalized citizen of the United States, you are basically done with immigration, right? Once you're sworn in, you're done with immigration, unless, of course, you have family members that you want to file for now that you're a citizen. But you yourself having to go through, filing a green card, filing for naturalization, going through interviews, that is it. Okay. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And if you would like to schedule a time to speak with me, you can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508 443 1788. And as always, all my contact information will be in the description to this video. So let's get started. The first thing I want to cover with you when it comes to naturalization is that before you even get to the interview, let's talk, do you qualify, right? Do you meet the requirements for naturalization? Because you can file for naturalization, get to the interview, and the officer tell you that you do not qualify. So then that's it. Okay. But we want to make sure before you get to the interview, before you even file, right? Before you even file your application, you want to make sure that you meet the requirements. All right. So, naturalization is specifically for green card holders that have had their green card for either 3 years if they're married to a US citizen, or 5 years if they're getting their green card through any other source, right? Including family, right? So, first thing, after you meet the requirement of having your green card for either 3 years or 5 years, you must be 18 years old. I've had people that their kids are 17 and they want to apply for citizenship, and I have to tell them they can't until they turn 18. Okay, so that is one requirement. It's not 18 and a half, it's 18. Okay. Oh, I mean 17 and a half. It's not, oh, he's going to be 18 in 2 months. Can we file today? No, you have to wait for that 2 months until the 18th birthday. Then you can go ahead and send off that application to USCIS. Okay. So that's the first thing. You have to have continuous physical presence in the US. All right. Continuous physical presence. So, for example, if you are um, filing for naturalization based on having your green card for 5 years, there's an expectation that you have been physically in the US, living in the US for at least the past 30 months, right? For at least 30 months in that 5 year period, you have physically been living in the US. If you are outside of the US for, let's say, a year or more, that breaks the continuous physical presence, and that means you have to start over counting your 5 years. All right. This particular 1 year outside of the US doesn't really have an exception. So a reentry permit is not an exception to that when it comes to meeting the naturalization requirements. So keep that in mind. I know some people will file for an reentry permit because they know that they will be outside of the US for over a year, and they file that, come back thinking that once they are back in the US, that the time that they spent outside will still count towards the 5 years, but it does not. Okay, so if you are outside of the US for a year or more, even with a reentry permit, you will still have to start over counting your 5 years or your 3 years if you are married to a US citizen. So just keep that in mind. All right. And then you have to, when you are trying to decide whether to apply for citizenship, you really have to pay attention to your records, right? Do you have any criminal records that could make it impossible for you to become a citizen, or that can lead to you being put in removal proceedings? Basically, US government saying, because of this criminal record that we found out about, you no longer qualify to remain in the US, even as a green card holder. Okay, so keep that in mind. Make sure that if you do have any criminal records, you are talking to an immigration lawyer first before you go ahead and file for citizenship. If you have an open case, right? If you have a case that's still going through the courts, you definitely want to wait till you have a decision before you go ahead and file. And why is that important? USCIS officers really cannot approve your case if, let's say, you have, a really bad, you have an open case that if you were found guilty on, that would lead to you not being able to qualify for citizenship and may even lead to you being put in removal proceedings to be taken out of the US, right? So if they see an open case that they know, if this is, if you are found guilty, you're not, you no longer qualify, they cannot go ahead and approve your citizenship case. So it's really important that if you do have an open case, you're talking to an immigration lawyer. You are looking at whether is this the right time to file or should you wait? Because remember, your application, your application fee is non-refundable. So you need to make sure this is actually the right time for you to be filing. Okay? If you know that you have not paid taxes or child support that you owe, and you do not have a payment plan, or you have a payment plan but you are, delinquent in it, this might not be the best time to go ahead and file. So it's really, really important that you talk to a lawyer, make sure that you meet the requirements, that the stuff that you know are in your history, like for example, if you owe taxes, how would that affect you being able to apply for citizenship? Um, Typically, having a payment plan and making payments on the payment plan would make an officer feel better, right, about granting you citizenship than if you owe, let's say, 10,000, you're not making any payments, there's no payment plan, you just owe the money to the US government. The officer is going to find that you don't have good moral character because you owe taxes, right? That is one of the things you're supposed to do as a resident of the US. And you not meeting that requirement makes the officer think you are not a person of good moral character. So you definitely want to pay attention to all those moving parts before you file. Now, let's say you meet all the requirements, you file your application, and you go for your biometrics. It's time for the interview. You get the interview notice. What should you be expecting, right? You should expect to have your civics questions, right? The 100 questions that you have been studying, because you should be studying from the day that you apply or even before that. So if you know you have a hard time retaining information, you should be studying as soon as you know that you want to apply for naturalization, because you will be asked those questions. Okay. So, again, make sure you can read, write, and speak basic English. That's what they're really looking for. Read, write, and speak basic English. Basic. They're not looking for you to, you know, speak like you have a PhD in English, just basic English. So I'll give you an example of um, an English test that one of my clients had, which was, what is the capital of the US? Right? So they had that on the screen. They had to read that, right? So that's how the test works. So you have the reading, writing, and the civics. Those are your tests. So when you come into the room, when you walk in, the officer walks you in, the first thing the officer is going to do is swear you in, right? Do you swear you're going to tell the truth, right? You're not going to lie to me. Yes, I do. The officer has you sit down, takes your green card and any other passport or anything like that that you have on you, and looks over it, make sure the person that's on the card is you, right? They want to verify your identity. Then the next thing the officer is going to do is your fingerprint. So the officer is going to have you put your index finger for both hands on an electronic fingerprint reader. And they'll have you do that. And once you do that, the officer can officially verify that it is you, right? And then start the interview process. In most situations, the officer is going to start with the English part, right? The English, the reading, writing, and the civics. That's what the officer is going to start with, because they want to make sure you can actually pass that before they go through your whole file and ask you all those questions. They really want to see where you are. So if you pass the civics and the English, then the officer moves on to your application, make sure everything is good there. And then once they see that everything lines up, they can go ahead and approve you and basically schedule your naturalization. In some cases, it may be the same day. In other cases, you may have to get an appointment for the swearing in. So you walk in, you've done your fingerprints right in front of the officer. Now the officer gets into the reading part. So an example is, they will have an iPad, right? You're sitting there, there's an iPad in front of you. The words will come up on the screen. The officer will ask you to read the words on the screen. It's really that simple, right? The the sentence will come up on the screen on the iPad. The officer will have you read the sentence on the screen. So the sentence may be, like I said before, you know, what is the capital of the United States? Right? So that's what you would read to the officer. And then the officer will tell you to write a sentence. So the officer will then say something like, the capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. Now it's up to you to write that sentence that the officer just gave you on the iPad. And no, however you write it, the officer is able to then save it. And that is proof that you passed the writing part, right? So the capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. And the officer wants to see that you wrote that. And it's, how do I put this? It's not that like you spelled everything 100% accurately, but that someone reading that sentence can recognize what you were trying to say. So if you misspell Washington, right? If you put Tin instead of Ton, it's still plausible for someone to see that you were trying to say Washington, right? But if you just put Washington, DC, unfortunately, that would not be a pass, because washing on its own is a word, right? So it cannot be, it's not a spelling error. because washing is a word that is in the dictionary. So therefore, you would not pass. So I've had an officer explain this. So this is not from me. This was from a USCIS officer during one of my clients' interviews that said clearly, when you are doing these tests, you know, if you are, you know, if you misspell a word, but the word that you actually spelled um, also has a meaning, then they can't give that to you. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you understand the question. Make sure you stop and think first. Okay. That is really important because I know a lot of people that rush through um, these interviews and don't really take the time to think about what the officer is asking, to think about how to properly respond to the question before they just go ahead and just write. So you want to really avoid that. You want to sit back, especially if you know you have a hard time spelling words. You really want to sit with the sentence for a minute and just think, okay, the capital of the US is Washington, D.C. How do I spell? You really want to sit there and think about it for a minute and then go ahead and write it. If you are good with basic English, like I said, these are basic English. They're not asking you like PhD words here. So you really want to make sure that if you know, as I'm saying this, that you cannot um, recognize the sentence or spell the words, that you are taking the time and doing ESL classes. So that's English as a second language classes to help you build up your knowledge and build up your English skills. Okay. And I know there are some ESL classes that are specifically geared towards you being able to pass your naturalization exam. So know while you're when you're looking for these classes, there are some that are specifically geared towards you being able to pass this. So make sure you are really taking the time and practicing, practicing before you get to your interview. Okay. The officer is not really there to judge you as far as um, if you are not the best at English, but you do your best and you answer the question that is asked and you do it well. That's it. Like, the officer is not going to ask you a follow-up question after you already passed the first question. Okay. So that concludes your reading and writing section. The next section is going to be your civics. So here is where the officer is going to ask you a bunch of questions about US history. Okay? US history. That's what the officer cares about. So if you have not been studying the 100 questions, and you do not meet the exceptions to the 100 questions, then you really need to start studying. Okay. When we send out their applications, we send them a link to the um, audio recording and the questions, the flashcards, so that they're able to continuously study and not wait till the last minute. So we make sure that that link, the links to every single way they can possibly study this is sent out to them. Okay. So you really want to make sure that as you're going through this process, you're not waiting till the last minute. You're not waiting till your interview date is set to start studying. You want to start studying right away. Unless, of course, like, you already know all the answers to the questions, then good for you. You don't need to worry about it. Now, for the exceptions, right? I said that you had to know how to read, write, and speak basic English. However, if you meet one of these exceptions, then you will be able to skip the reading and writing and the speaking English. So what does the speaking English mean? It means that your interview is going to be in English, right? But if you meet one of these exceptions, your interview can actually be in another language. It can be in your language, right? And then the officer will ask you the question. You have an interpreter there to ask you the questions, and you can answer in your language. I have done this for several clients, so do not fret. There is exceptions. The question is, do you want to wait for the exceptions, or do you want to go ahead and take ESL classes and beef up your English? So the first exception is if you are 50 years old and over, and you have lived in the US as a permanent resident for at least 20 years. So that's the 50-20 rule. So you're at least 50 and you've had your permanent residency for at least 20 years. Then you can skip the English part altogether, but you'll still have your civics. So don't get too excited, right? You'll still have the civics, the US history. You'll just take it in your native language instead of in English. If you are 55 and over and you have been a permanent resident for at least 15 years, so this is the 55-15 rule, then you can skip the English part altogether and do your civics in your native language. The next exception is if you are, if you have a disability that makes it impossible for you to learn to read and write English, right? If you have a disability, then you can use there's a specific form that your doctor has to fill out to say exactly what that disability is. It could be a severe learning disability, but it has to be documented by your doctor to show that you are not able to learn a new language and study for this test and do all of that in your native, to study for the test, all of those things. So then that would be able to waive not just the English part, but also the civics part, right? So if it's impossible for you to learn English or retain information because of a medical diagnosis, right? That's the part people miss. There has to be a medical diagnosis, and your doctor has to fill out a form N648 in order for that to be considered by USCIS. Okay, the officer will be able to look at the forms and make a decision before you even start the interview of whether you can um, take the test in your native language or not. Right? If the only problem your doctor puts in there is that you're not able to speak English, but you're able to retain information in your own language, the officer may choose to have you do the test in your language. But most of the time, if the disability is documented well, the officer will basically waive the English reading and writing, the speaking English, and the civics part of the exam. Okay, so that is really the only ways to waive the English part. So pay attention to how long you've been in the US, how long you have, so basically, how long you've been in the US and how old you are. So if you don't have a learning disability, if you don't have any medical conditions that make it impossible for you to learn English, but you're still not willing to take the classes or all those things, just know you do have options. You just have to wait longer than 5 years, right? You either have to wait 15 years or 20 years. But you do have to wait if you're not able to speak English and you don't meet any of the exceptions already. All right. So that is the English reading and writing and the civics. So once the officer is done with those, once the officer is done with the civics part and said that you passed, now they move on to the next part, which is your file. right? They go through your file, they go through your application, ask you all the questions that are on your application to make sure nothing has changed and that the information on your application is correct. And then they'll have you sign everything. And after that, the officer makes a decision. They either decide to tell you right away that they're going to approve you, or they will tell you that they may need to review your file more to make a decision. If they say they need to review your file more, that does not mean that they're not going to approve you. It just means they may want to take a look at one or two things before making a decision. Okay. But as far as the English, reading and writing, and the civics, the officer will definitely tell you whether you pass that or not. Because if you do not pass those, the officer will have to schedule you for another interview. There's no there's no two ways about it, right? The officer will give you a couple chances during that interview, but if you still fail, the officer will tell you right then and there that you failed and that they will need to schedule you for another interview. And that's just the normal procedure. So you get one more shot at the English, the reading, writing, and the civics part. You get another shot at that. If at the second interview you fail those again and you don't meet any of the requirements, the officer would then deny your application. So then you have to wait and apply again. So it's really important, like I said before, you want to analyze whether you actually qualify for citizenship before you jump in. Because again, if you're not willing to learn English and you don't meet the requirements for waiving the English part of the test and you get denied, you will have to file all over again, pay the fee all over again, go through the process all over again to get approved for your citizenship. So you really want to make sure you're studying, make sure you're taking the time to learn and to feel comfortable speaking English, reading and writing, and learning that civics. There's so many ways to learn the civics that, depending on the way you learn the best, go ahead and try all of them, right? There's the audio version, there's the video, there's the written, and then there's also an app that you can go ahead and do practice tests on. So you can literally get on the app and just answer civics questions all day, right? So that you are really able to remember. Not only are you reading the information, but you're also testing yourself as well. So make sure you are taking advantage of all the ways that you can be practicing for this test. Because the last thing you want is for your application to be perfect, and then the only thing that messes it up is that civics, okay? Because they give you so many ways to study for it that you don't want that to be the problem. All right. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I do go back and look at those. I hope you found this helpful. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions or want to meet with me personally to discuss your case, go ahead and do that and reach out to me. All my contact information is in the description to this video. And as always, if you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit the like button. If you know someone who needs to hear this, that are ready to apply for their citizenship, but they're not quite sure what to expect, go ahead and share this video with them. And if you are listening in a place where you can subscribe, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my uploads. And once again, I am Lilian Chukura. I am the owner of Legal. We do immigration law and we do it well. Bye for now.